Today's reading is from Fuxin's Book of Thoughts on silence, wisdom, and meditation. Being silent. Practicing silence to empty all kinds of noise within us is not a difficult practice. With some training, we can do it. In noble silence, we can walk, we can sit, we can enjoy a meal. When we have that kind of silence, we have enough freedom to enjoy being alive and to appreciate all the wonders of life. With that kind of silence, we are more capable of healing ourselves, mentally and physically. We have the capacity to be there, alive, because we really are free from our regrets and suffering concerning the past, free from our fear and uncertainty about the future, free from all kinds of mental chatter. Being silent in this way, when we are alone, is good. And being silent in this way, together, is particularly dynamic and healing. Experiencing problems. When we experience problems, either internal or external, our narrow, unskillful mind only makes them worse. When someone with an itchy skin condition scratches it, he feels some temporary relief and thinks his scratching has made it better. In fact, his scratching has made it worse. We are like that. We do the same thing every day of our lives. Instead of trying to stop problems like this, we should relax and rely on our skillful, silent mind. But silence does not mean dark, non-functioning, sluggish or sleepy. The seed of Zen. A man once took a flower and without a word held it up before the men seated in a circle around him. Each man in turn looked at the flower and then explained its meaning, its significance, all that is symbolic. The last man, however, seeing the flower, said nothing, only smiled. The man in the centre then also smiled and handed him the flower. This is the origin of Zen. Desire and attachment. Once upon a time, a man who had been walking became thirsty. He saw a spring flowing out of a log and bent down to drink his fill. When his thirst was satisfied, he raised up his hand and said to the spring, "I am satisfied now. You can stop flowing." The spring, of course, did not hear his words, but kept flowing out of the log as before. When he saw this, the man became angry and said again, "I told you that I was finished drinking and that you should stop flowing. Why then do you keep flowing?" A person who was nearby saw what was happening and said to the man, "You are a fool. Why do you keep ordering the water to stop flowing? Why don't you just move on yourself?" Ordinary people in this world are just like that foolish man. They drink their fill of desires of the senses, and when they are tired of it all, they say, "Enough, world of the senses, please go away. I have drunk my fill of you." The world of the senses, of course, never heeds their words, but just continues to flow. In response to this, most people just continue complaining. They say, "I told you to go away. Why do you keep after me all the time? I am tired of you." To this a wise man would say, if you want our passions to stop, we have to leave them, for they will never leave us by themselves. When we have learnt to be unattached to our senses, our delusions will decrease, and we will find liberation from all of our foolish desires. Most people do not listen to this advice, but instead act like the man in the story. When they are tired of drinking, they order the water to stop flowing. This was taken from the Sutra of 100 Parables. Analyzing, blaming, and fixing. One of the greatest hindrances to living a more awake life, a life of satisfaction and appreciation, is that we spend most of our time lost in the mental world. We are literally addicted to our thoughts, whether we are planning, fantasizing, worrying, dramatizing, conversing, or whatever. If we are honest, isn't it true that most of our time is spent spinning in thoughts? There are 3 habitual grooves where most of us get caught spinning in the mental world: analyzing, blaming, and fixing. These conditional patterns are detours from being present to reality, and taking any one of them guarantees that we will perpetuate the storyline of me. In fact, being caught in the mind, whether through analyzing, blaming, or fixing, is one of the prime aspects of the me phase of our practice. Sounds of silence. Silence is often described as the absence of sound, yet it is also a very powerful sound. There are 5 true sounds. The first is the wonderful sound, the sound of wonders of life that are calling us. This is the sound of the birds, the rain, and so on. The second sound is the sound of the one who observes the world. This is the sound of listening, the sounds of silence. The third sound is the Brahma sound. This is the transcendental sound, Om, which has a long history in Indian spiritual thought. The fourth sound is a sound of the rising tide. This sound symbolizes the voice of the Buddha, the teaching of the Buddha that can clear away misunderstanding, remove affliction, and transform everything. It is penetrating and effective. The fifth sound is the sound that transcends all sounds of the world. This is the sound of impermanence, a reminder not to get caught up in or too attached to particular words or sounds. The Buddha said things are very simple and did not get caught up in words. So, if a teaching is too complicated, it's not the sound of the Buddha. If what you are hearing is too loud, too noisy, convoluted, it is not the voice of the Buddha. Wherever you go, you can hear the fifth sound. It is the sound that transcends all sounds of the world.
So in my last talk with you for this retreat, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about practice. Many of us, if not most of us, we come into this life like a rider on the storm. Okay? And from a very early ages, early school years, we learn that we are, even though we don't realise that, we are living in a results-orientated society. From a very early age, expectations are put upon us by our parents, our teachers, our peers. And as time goes by, not much changes. There are more results required, more expectations to achieve. Just the people who have the expectations tend to change a little bit. Maybe still our parents, but now it's our employer or our clients if they're self-employed, or the government in relation to the tax office. Okay. But the one person who puts probably the biggest and most expectations upon us, the one person who puts so much pressure on ourselves to achieve results, to have good outcomes, one who has the most highest expectations of us is ourselves. So we go through life. Years pass. We go from one result, one expectation, one gaining of a positive outcome to another. As we start to approach possibly retirement, we start to get a bit of a glimpse at that point in time of what the outcome might be of our life, of all this effort, of all these results. And in many cases, we're not overly impressed, be it with the financial end, or our relationships end, or even our spiritual end of our life. We think back and think we've missed this, we've missed that, missed opportunities. And in many cases, most people, when they start to see this possible outcome of our life, which can lead to what we might call our destiny, if you want to use that word. Yeah? And when people are not over impressed with the result, or felt they should have done better, or they deserve more, in many cases it's natural for people to transfer the blame for this. And if they can't find somebody else to blame, then it must have been their fate. I don't believe in fate myself. To me, those who believe in fate believe that there is a greater cosmic entity who has taken the time to sort out or set out the life progress and the life outcomes of the almost 9 billion people living on this planet today, and also the trillions and trillions of lives of people who have ever lived on this planet from the big time of beginning of mankind, as well as the trillions and trillions of animals and wildlife that live on the planet today, not to mention the unknown number of wildlife and flora and fauna in the past, from the beginning of time. Not to mention sorting out the lives of an unknown number of beings on an unknown number of planets and an unknown number of galaxies within the universe. This all sounds like a pretty darn big job to me. A people tend to associate the outcome of their life or with their fate. They put destiny and fate together. Destiny is not controlled by fate. Destiny is controlled by our karma. And our karma is controlled by our actions. Well, not exactly. Our karma is controlled by the intent of our actions. So what is it is going to control this intent? To make it positive so that the outcome or our karmatic outcome is positive, which leads to a positive outcome of our life, which can lead on to a positive outcome of our eventual destiny. It comes down to our actions, whether they be verbal or physical actions. If our verbal, our physical actions are either positive or negative or positive intent, the outcomes can, in most cases today, be positive or negative in our karmatic outcome. So what is it that controls our actions? Be them verbal, physical, or even mental actions. It's our attitude and our ego. It's our attitude and our ego that impacts on our actions. It's our actions that impacts on our intent, it impacts on our actions, which impacts on our karma, which impacts on our outcome of our lives. So how do we modify the ego and the attitudes? It's through the practice of mindfulness, being aware and awake to what we are doing. In the practice of the study of the Dharma, the practice of our meditation, coming into the practice of compassion and generosity. Compassion and generosity are the two cornerstones on which Buddhism was built. The foundation of all Buddhism is the practice of compassion and generosity. When you start to practice compassion and generosity, this starts to impact on your ego and your attitudes, which impacts on your actions, which impacts on your actions, which impacts on your karma, which can lead to the outcomes of your lives and your destiny. So it's important to have a positive outcome. We need to start sooner than later. It's important to do our practice as regularly as possible, every day. The reason it's important to do our practice every day, the reason it is important, while every day's practice is important, is because you're giving up a day of your life to do it. So what you do every day is important for that reason. I know it's difficult. We have busy lives. Living in this Western socio-economic society, we've got working for the man, we're raising kids, we're paying bills. Time is short. Time is short. But it's important. What we do each day is important, as I said, because we're giving up a day of our life to do it. So when it comes to our questioning of life, when it comes to our looking into what road we are going to travel, what seems to be the difficulty? And I like to quote you the words as best I can from the late great Krishnamurti, who said that, and I'll try and get it right, our difficulty is we have listened to many things. We know a great deal. We have searched, we have read, we have sought the advice of others. We've wandered this earth trying to find out what it's all about. But we never ask ourselves, we never demand of ourselves truly serious questions. We always seem to ask ourselves superficial questions. If you ask yourself superficial questions, you'll get a superficial answer. But if you ask yourself questions that exercise the mind, exercise the brain, then your feelings and you give your feelings and your whole attention to that question, then you begin to discover yourself. And it's only then you start to truly be free. Over this weekend, Rose and I have done a lot of talking, giving a lot of information. We've talked on a wide variety of subjects. Okay. But in reality, over the entire weekend, we're only trying to do two things. No matter what subject we're talking about, we're only trying to do two things. Firstly, we are trying to shake you awake. And not necessarily tell you how to dream or live better, just to simply shake you awake. Because we all need to wake up. Every time I've done a closing on meditation, I remember what I said to you this morning. Okay. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of extreme importance. Okay. Remember I said that? I also said that time is short. I also said we need to awaken, we need to take heed. Do not squander your life. So we need to wake up. Because you are all Buddhas. You're all baby Buddhas. You all have Buddha potential. It's all just there. Just beyond the grasp. Now please don't think that awakening is the end. It's not. Awakening is the end of seeking. The end of the seeker. But it's the beginning of a life lived from your true nature. That's a whole different story, a whole different discovery. Living from an experience of oneness, embodying that you are an expression of oneness. Because there's no question of you becoming the one, because you already are the one. It's just there. You've been the one your entire life. But we are being caught up in the delusion of life. The Buddha called it the dust in our eyes. It's time to remove the dust from our eyes and see life in its true reality. The second one is, if you have awakened, if the one has awakened to itself, have you really remembered who you are? And if you have, are you consciously living as an awakened person? All the Dharma talks I've given have all been about either awakening or living in an awakened being, as an awakened being. No matter what I seem to have talked about, no matter what subjects we talked about, Four Noble Truths, 5 hindrances, anger this morning, the other readings that I've done, the Dharma talks that I've given, the journey of the Bodhisattva. It's It's all about either awakening or living it as an awakened being. Nothing more. The disappointment is, I cannot do it for you. It is your journey. And hopefully here over this weekend, you've had a start or a continuation of that journey. And I hope it's given you motivation to look further, look deeper into the life. Look to remove that mask. See, who am I? The true self, the true person behind the mask.